We've got a delightful guest, Belinda Stott. She's the author of 9 books, a sex therapist and a relationship counsellor specialising in helping young adults. Belinda's been married to her husband, Matt, for 19 years, so she must be doing something right. Together they run a life and relationship skills course called Soul Tour across New Zealand, Australia and the UK. They also run marriage seminars for the parenting place up and down the country called Marriage the Early Years, which exists to help couples through those tricky first few years of marriage. And in fact, Belinda, you finished a Soul Tour course about an hour ago. Is that right?
Yep, I did.
Was it couples or was it individuals?
This was a group of Anglican young adults, so they were fantastic.
And do you reckon you achieved anything there?
Well, they all had pretty good feedback at the end, so yeah, hopefully.
Excellent.
So tell us a bit about that course. What's that course involved? Yeah, and is it something that people could look up and find out more about it?
Definitely. It's actually based on a course that a counsellor in Nelson, David Riddell, created many, many years ago called Living Wisdom. So Soul Tour is like the young adult version of it. So we take kind of 16 to 30-year-olds and we teach them about 60 topics around mental and emotional health, life, relationship skills. We have lots of fun with them, lots of laughter and jokes and stuff, but lots of therapeutic time. So they kind of get set up with a good foundation to have a great future and a great marriage.
You've playing to all of our strengths tonight, actually, Belinda, or we're playing to yours insofar as we've got Valentine's Day as the topic.
Yeah.
And so we are going to spend a little bit of time trying to coax out of people some stories about those kind of awkward Valentine's first dates kind of stories.
Yeah.
But to tap into something that you and your husband Matt are involved in, helping couples through those early years where the sort of honeymoon phase wears off and you actually find yourself in the, oh my gosh, what have I signed up for the rest of my life?
I often think about friends of mine when they met, he just thought it was wonderful how emotional she was and how compassionate and caring. And after they'd been married about 2 years, he was thinking, why is she so emotional all the time? And she was thinking, why is he so hard? Why isn't he softer? And I think that's so typical that we tend to get really excited about the things our partners have that we don't have and think it's amazing and wonderful. And then when we get married, it starts to irritate us. And we start thinking, why aren't you exactly the same as me so that we can agree on everything?
Is the fix as simple as a perspective shift? Because opposites attract is one of the sayings. It seems to be true, but it is quite hard to live with.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
Is marriage just a broken concept? What's your opinion?
Oh no, I think marriage can definitely work. I kind of tend to think there's two kind of sides to it. I think one side is understanding the differences, and so actually on the Marriage Early Years course that we do for the parenting place, we spend the whole morning looking at differences. So we look at StrengthsFinder, we look at Myers-Briggs, we look at love languages, languages of apology. They're kind of all tools to look at differences. We even look at family mottos, so the beliefs that we've learned growing up in our families and our family culture that we just expect our partner to fall in line with, basically. So I think you have that side of it, that differences is a major thing. It's really about understanding and appreciating each other once you get over the initial shock that you haven't married yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think the other side of it is the mental health side of it. So my number one piece of advice for people looking for a partner, which is what I help lots of people do, to find a good partner, is to find someone teachable. So I think, to me, that's top of the list for mental health, that your partner is willing to change and grow and admit their faults and get better. So I think, that's the part that takes a lot of work. What are you bringing into the marriage from your past? What's the kind of mental health side that's going to impact each other?
That's so interesting that you love to get couples together. You've had some success, I've heard. Hey,
I have. They don't all invite me to their weddings, though. I'm not sure what that's about.
Well, I have to say, I am sworn off being a matchmaker. I have zero skill in this area. I have friends who've got a couple, 3, 4 couples together. What do you think? Can I just ask a question in terms of, we focus so much growing up, and I was mentioning I've got a 13-year-old daughter and it's the first time she's ever become aware of Valentine's Day, but we focus so much on our extracurricular activities and our sporting achievements and our academic success and what we're going to do for a job. There doesn't seem to be much focus in our world on how to set yourself up for success in a relationship, when it's very expensive emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually for that number one primary relationship to break down, whereas we change jobs expectedly 4 to 7 times in our life. Like, you know, what's happening here? Why aren't we like teaching our young people how to make great marriages and great relationships?
It's interesting, isn't it? We do a session at Soul Tour, our course that we run on trust, and I always say to the students who has had a lesson from their family or who's had a lesson at high school on trust and how trust works and how to fix it when it's broken, how do we know in what areas to trust people, etc. And no one, like maybe one person in 100 will say, I've had lesson on trust. And yet, if you don't have trust, you don't have intimacy. Trust is essential for intimacy. If you don't trust someone, you're not going to make yourself vulnerable to them. So it's one of the kind of the core life relationship skills we need, and yet we're not being taught it in the places that we could be taught it.
How do you teach trust?
Well, there's some pretty, I guess, basic concepts. I mean, the most important thing is that everyone's trustworthy somewhere in their lives, but no one's trustworthy ever in their lives.
Right.
Those kind of concepts that turn the lights on and people go, this is how you trust safely.
So it's not an all or nothing thing. You can actually trust somebody maybe fiscally, but relationally they might be a little bit dubious. Or you can trust somebody relationally, but not fiscally. Or you can trust them to be reliable, except when it comes to being on time.
Oh, yes.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big part of it, isn't it? That as you get to know your partner, you figure out where can I count on them and where are they maybe not so onto it. my amazing husband, he's so supportive and such a great dad and just so loyal and faithful, but he's terrible with details. So if I want him to get something from the supermarket, this is the wee process that we go through. And I've learned to do this over 19 years of marriage. First I'll say, look me in the eyes, put down what you're doing, look me in the eyes, and then I'll say, this is what I need, and I'll tell him my 10 things, and I'll say, please repeat it back to me, and so he'll do that. And then I'll have written a list, and I'll put it in his hand, and I'll close his fingers over it, and I'll say, that's the list. And then when he leaves, I'll text him the list as well. And then 9 times out of 10, he will forget what I said. He'll walk 3 steps, put the list down and leave it behind, and he won't check his phone till he gets home, and he'll bring me 10 completely different things and say, I thought you wanted these.
Yes,
but he's a great husband.
I have a great husband. I just can't trust him to always get the details right, so I have to be realistic.
Yeah.
As far as romantic love and Valentine's Day goes, do you hear any talk about it? How are young people approaching it, or what's your view of this? I guess it's kind of a little bit freaky day. I was just saying to Sam that my daughter has decided to deal with it with her friend group by they're all going to look out for each other. They're all going to bake each other cupcakes and write each other cards.
Oh, that's lovely.
And do something nice for each other so that they feel loved. Everybody wants and needs to feel loved, whether it's romantically or not.
Yeah.
And Valentine's Day is that potential day of taking a risk or being embarrassed or rejected because you don't get anything, or rejected because what you offer isn't accepted. What's your approach to the celebration?
Yeah, I mean, we work with young adults. We don't work with teenagers. I mean, the youngest is 16, and honestly, I don't think I've ever heard a young adult talk about Valentine's Day with me. That's not to say they don't. It doesn't seem to come up. But the topic of dating certainly comes up. Right. Dating and romance all the time. One of our sessions is called The Misbeliefs That Keep People Single, and that tends to be one of the most popular sessions.
Can you drop a couple of those misbeliefs on us?
Yeah, sure.
Hang on, I've got a few people I want to have listening to the show, Belinda. I'll just give me a chance to text them. No.
Well, they can come to Soul Tour or get in touch.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of them is that admitting that you want to find someone is desperate, and that's not okay. Another one might be that I have to know within a few dates if I could marry them. I mean, I'm talking particularly in religious circles, Christian circles. There's often a lot of stigma around dating. If you're dating someone, it's because you're going to marry them, and then that puts massive pressure on. Sometimes it's I'm not good enough for the person I'd want. Sometimes it's I'm looking for Mr. or Mrs. Perfect. So, no one is ever good enough.
So then you'll never find someone?
Yeah, you'll never find someone. I mean, there's a lot of them. There's at least 14 of them. But then, of course, the other side of it is you can get your thinking sorted out, but you still have to find someone. So then a lot of people will say, there's just no one. There's no one in my circles I would consider dating. And so my advice at that point is usually internet dating or telling your friends you're interested so they can find someone or set you up with someone, because it's really a numbers game. If you meet enough people, eventually you'll find somebody that is a possibility.
Yes. And there are people that are good at that and people who aren't. And this is a bit of a hobby horse of mine, so you guys will have to stop me from using up the whole next hour talking about this. Because I didn't get married till I was 36, so I had truly some pretty patronising things said to me. As you're saying, Belinda, inside of religious circles it can be particularly bad, but also outside of that, well-meaning people, but saying some pretty daft things to you as a person. But one of the things that I would say is, and you've mentioned about it in, say, a religious setting, but I think as Kiwis we don't do dating culture well. There aren't too many places where, there aren't too many things where I'd look to the States for a steer, especially not in recent times. But actually I think the US does dating culture quite well. It doesn't seem shrouded in as much kind of pressure and innuendo as it is here in New Zealand. They'll quite happily go out on a date with somebody just because they've been asked and say, hey, it's actually good for the soul to be asked by somebody to go out for dinner and to enjoy their company, and they'll be happily going on multiple dates with multiple people. It's not seen as being this exclusive thing. But I think there is this tendency in New Zealand for you to almost know before you know.
Yes.
And to have thereby agreed to a whole lot more than dinner by saying yes to dinner. So the ask has got a lot more attached to it than that, and so has the yes. And I just think, for example, with a bunch of young adults that we were teaching years ago, we sort of started this little thing, changing the world one date at a time. We were just going to push back against when in Rome we weren't going to do as the Romans did. We were going to sort of try and do it a little bit differently. And I just think, for the record, we would do well to actually adopt some of that. Slightly less pressure cooker environment.
Yes to dinner.
Yeah, it means yes to dinner. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, I totally agree. Although I do have a bit of a story. You said you wanted some first date stories. Can I share one?
Yeah,
This was one of our students shared some years ago. He really, really liked this girl. I think her name was Anna. He just thought she was amazing, and so he asked her out, and they went on a date. It went really well. The next date they had lined up, she contacted him and said, I'm really sorry I have to babysit tonight. He said, oh, please, can I come babysit with you? He's really keen. She said, okay, sure. So they babysat together. The kids were really full on, it was quite a full-on night. When he got home, his friend was waiting to hear how the night had gone, and so he wrote him a text. But this was back when, if your text was quite long, it got split into two texts. And, they went separately. So somehow the first text went to his friend and the second text went to the girl, Anna. So the first text says, babysitting with Anna tonight went really well, but pretty full on. Shoot me if and then at that point it stopped. And the text that went to her was, I want to have children in the next 3 years. So out of the blue, after the second date, he's saying, I want to have children in the next 3 years. Luckily, it didn't put her off, and they did get married and have children.
Actually, for a woman, if a guy had babysat with you and it had been really hard work, and he'd said, I want to have children in the next 3 years, you'd think, I might be able to slow him down, but that's a good sign.
Yes, that's right. He can handle full-on children. That's good.
Belinda, that might be a good segue for us to throw the phones open and see if we can top that in terms of a first date story. And we'll let you and Matt go and recover from your weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us, literally an hour after you finished doing a course. And,
you're totally welcome.
Yeah. And so where can people go to find out a bit more about Soul Tour?
They can go to the Soul Tour website. It's www.soultour, so soultour.co.nz.
Brilliant. Hey, thanks for coming on.